I worked. One time I worked 13 hours to make as much money as he'd agreed to pay for an 8-hour day. So probably all of you have experienced a situation where you were taken advantage of because you were in an unfortunate circumstance. Now, that's what these people were about. Well, and he asked the question there in verse 3 of chapter 10, and what will you do in the day of visitation? Now, the question is, what are you going to do in the day of visitation? In the day of reckoning? In the day of judgment? And in desolation, which shall come from far? And to whom will you flee for help? What did Peter ask Jesus when Jesus said to the disciples, will you also forsake or flee, leave? What did Peter ask? To whom shall we go? You see, it's the same rhetorical question here. To whom will you go or flee for help? And where will you leave your glory? That idea, and where will you leave your glory? What does that suggest?
The riches that they had accumulated from the widows and the orphans, and it's going to be taken from them. What are you going to do about that?
Yeah. What's your legacy? What's going to be your legacy? I'm thinking of a fellow whose legacy, when I was a young person, getting started in first employment and trying to buy a house, and wasn't able to muster enough money for the down payment. In those years, Ned, yours, your father's and grandfather's generation, you had to have enough money down to buy a house, And I remember the legacy of this rich old dude in the neighborhood. He was a director of a bank, and they would turn down loans. The directors would turn down loans as well as approve some loans. And so what he would do, he's a rich dude. He was on the bank. He knew who needed money because as a director of the bank, he turned down, loans. And so he'd go to these people and say, hey, I can loan you some money. But what was the caveat there? Instead of 6% interest, it's going to be 8% interest. And I remember being in this guy's kitchen, and he said something like, I went to him because I need a loan. He said, well, I don't know about my wife here, but I can loan something for 8% rather than the 6% at the bank, you see. I can help you out here. And I'm thinking, right. Because I knew this guy foreclosed on people that couldn't pay pay him back in a month. He'd foreclose on them. Now, what kind of a legacy is that? What do I remember about this guy? What do you want to be remembered for? Gypping somebody out of something? Taking advantage of somebody? What do you want? What's your legacy? That's what he's saying here. Where will you leave your glory? Without me, they shall bow down, and they shall fall into the slain. What happened to northern Israel? At this moment in time, all of northern Israel was either killed or taken captive. And the Assyrians were an awful people. The Assyrian leadership, they didn't waterboard for torture. They did horrible things to people. And when you're taken captive, you're either going to be worked to death or starved to death or otherwise killed. I mean, that was that's the way they operated, you see. And God's saying to the people, and he's also saying to Judah in terms of the future, this is the way it's going to be. For all this, his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. What's that mean? That means this is the way it's going to be. Then Isaiah turns his attention to the Assyrian. He says, "Oh, Assyrian," or some translations use another term, "ho." That "oh" or "ho." What's kind of the idea there? Warning. Yeah, ho. Oh, Syrian. It's a warning. The rod of mine anger and the staff is in their hand. And the staff in their hand is my indignation. Now, he's going to send the Assyrian against northern Israel and also against Judah. The good guys of the group. Or at least they're better guys than the northern group. I will send him against an hypocritical nation, and certainly northern Israel was hypocritical. To a lesser extent, Judah was hypocritical. He'd already said that in previous language here. And against the people of my wrath, he says, and against the people of my wrath will I give him a charge to take the spoil. He was commissioning Assyria to punish his Israel and to some extent Judah, and to take prey and to tread them down like the mire of the streets. Mire of the streets, what's that? It was the muddy highways, streets, so forth. Going to tread down, you're going to be squashed. This might be, there was a person in the Atlanta area that was really killed on the highway, and fire department had to use a hose to spray the flesh off of the highway. Now that is such a, isn't it just such a frightening kind of thought? But isn't that what he's saying here? You're going to be squashed into the street, and you're going to be part of the pavement, so to speak. I mean, this should have gotten their attention. It really should have gotten their attention. It's going to be like the mire of the streets. A horrible thought. Howbeit, now he's still talking about, this, he's still talking about Assyria. Verse 7, howbeit he meaneth not so, neither does his heart think so, but it is in his heart to destroy and cut off nations, not a few. He's talking about Assyria. Did the Assyrians really know that they were a tool of God? Herschel says no. What did they think? Yeah. It was business as usual with them. You see, that's what they did. That was their nature. That was who they were. They were mean, contemptible, worthless, evil people. And they didn't care anything about God. Now, how do I know they didn't care anything about God? How do I know that you see, after they obliterated northern Israel, where did they turn their attention then? They turned their attention to the outlying areas of Judah, to the various cities. And then they turned their attention, after they conquered all of those little suburbs, those little surrounding towns, then they approached in about 700 BC, 702 along in there. Then they approached Jerusalem. And in 18th chapter of 2 Kings, and also in the 36th chapter of Isaiah, it's reported what they did. So let's just go over the 36th chapter of Isaiah, and see what they had in mind. They weren't. They in fact were God's tool, his instrument to punish Israel, and they were about to punish Judah, but God had another plan. What was his plan? His plan was, at least for the time being, for the next century or so, his plan was to protect Judah. And so, and let's just look, let's peruse this 36th chapter, because it gives the history here. Now, it came to pass in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, that Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the defense cities of Judah and took them. So, the surrounding cities, he took them. And the king of Syria sent Rabshakeh from Lachish. Now, they were doing battle at Lachish. But he sent this dude to Jerusalem, to King Hezekiah, with a great army. Now, so he's got a great army there. And so he says, and he stood, in verse 2, and he stood by the conduit of the upper pool in the highway of the fuller's field. Now that upper pool in the highway of the fuller's field, we've run onto that before in our study of Isaiah. And it seems to be a kind of a meeting place there. Isaiah met with the previous king of Israel at that same spot. In verse 3, then came forth unto him Eliakim, and Hilkiah's son, which was over the house, and Shebna the scribe, and Joab and Asaph's son, the recorder. And Rabshakeh said unto them, so they had some kind of a little negotiation here. It's kind of like the G20 met, last week. and the heads of those nations met to discuss this and that. But in this case, it was Rabshakeh said unto them in verse 4, "Say now to Hezekiah," the envoy from Hezekiah to the Assyrian leader here, "Say unto Hezekiah, Thus saith the great king, the king of Assyria, What confidence is this wherein thou trust?" Now here's the scenario. Here's the scene. Big army out there. The Assyrian nation was the dominant nation. And here's the walls of Jerusalem were, closed up. The doors were closed. And this representative of the Assyrians comes up and says to the envoy here, the ambassadors of King Hezekiah, and he says, "Now what confidence is this wherein thou trustest? I say, sayest thou, but they are but vain words. I have counsel and strength for war. Now on whom dost thou trust that thou rebellest against me?" See, according to 2 Kings 18, old Hezekiah had already been negotiating with the king of Assyria, and he sent money. He sent gold and silver, stripped it out of the temple, sent it to the king. And what good did that do? None, because here's the Assyrian army there surrounding Jerusalem. And he's saying to these people, well, essentially what he's saying is that, look, we have taken all these cities, these nations, and you better just surrender. In the latter part of verse 6, that thou rebellest against, or verse 5, that thou rebellest against me. Lo, thou trustest in the staff of the broken reed on Egypt. Now, Hezekiah, Judah had been, they had been dealing with Egypt for protection against Assyria. And so this is fact. Lo, thou trustest in the staff of the broken reed on Egypt, whereon if a man lean, he will go, it will go into his hand and pierce it. That's another way of saying Egypt isn't any power. So is Pharaoh king of Egypt to all that trust in him. But if thou say to me, we trust in the Lord our God, it is not he whose high places were all. Is it not he whose high places and whose altars Hezekiah hath taken away, and said to Judah and to Jerusalem, ye shall worship before this altar. Now, you see, the Assyrians must have had some intelligence. They must have had some spies. They must have known that Hezekiah took away the altars. And why did he take away all those altars? The Jews were worshiping at altars all over the countryside, and some of them were idolatrous altars. Why did Hezekiah take them away? What was the rule in terms of the altar? Was every Jew to have an altar in his backyard or front yard? No. There was one altar. Where was that? Temple. That's where you worship. That's where the altar is, you see. Well, he says, the representative of the Assyrians are saying, well, now, kind of saying, you've taken away the altars of your God, so you must not have any confidence in your God. taking away their altars. Well, he was confused about that. In verse 8, now therefore give pledges, I pray thee, to my master the king of Assyria, and I will give thee 2,000 horses if thou be able to, on thy part to set riders upon. You suppose this guy was telling the truth?
I think he's ridiculed.
Yeah. He wasn't going to give them horses. He wasn't going to do anything. And if thou be able to, look at ridicule there, if thou be able to, on thy part to set riders upon them. Yeah, we'll give you 2,000 horses, but you probably won't have 2,000 people that can ride them. You're in such a weak situation. How then wilt thou turn away the face of one captain of the least of my master's servants? How are you going to defend yourself against just one little cadre of soldiers? And put thy trust in Egypt for chariots and for horsemen. And am I now come up without the Lord against the land to destroy it? The Lord has said unto me, go against the land and destroy it. Did God say to Assyria, destroy Judah?
Yes.
Pardon me?
Yes, yes. There are other passages. Remember when Josiah went out to fight against Necho, the king of Egypt, 2 Chronicles 35:20. The Egyptian king said, my fight's not with you. The Lord has sent me to do this.
But
Don't interfere. Of course, that's when Josiah died. So Necho knew.
But in this case, Isaiah is chronicling, is repeating the history, is identifying the history of what was the encounter between the Assyrian army and Judah. Did God tell Assyria to, at this point in time, to get rid of Judah? The answer is no. Now, in the case of the Babylonians, a century later, there was that. I mean, God did authorize the Babylonians to come in and destroy Judah and take them captive, but a remnant would come back. Go up against this land and destroy it. Now, this guy was lying through his teeth. Then said Eliakim and Shebna and Joab and unto Rabshakeh, speak, I pray thee, unto thy servants in the Syrian language, for we understand it. And speak not to us in the Jews' language, in the ears of the people that are on the wall. Now, they must have had an assembly of people on the wall there. And so what the representative of Assyria was trying to do was trying to get the people, the Jews, the ordinary, the run-of-the-mill folks, to rebel against Hezekiah. But then verse 12, but Rabshakeh said, hath my master sent me to thy master and to thee to speak words? Hath he not sent me to the men that sit him on the wall? Now he's saying to them, you're going to be, you people, you ordinary folks, you're going to be in such bad shape that you'll eat your own refuge and drink your own urine. Then Rabshakeh stood and cried with a loud voice in the Jews' language and said, hear ye the words of the great king, the king of Assyria. Thus saith the king, let not Hezekiah deceive you, for he shall not be able to deliver you. Neither let Hezekiah make you trust in the Lord, saying, the Lord will surely deliver us. The city shall not be delivered this city shall not be delivered into the hand of the king of Syria. Hearken not to Hezekiah, for thus saith the king of Assyria, make an agreement with me by a present, and come out to me, and eat every one of his vine, and every one of his fig tree, and drink ye every one of the waters of his own cistern, until I come and take you away to a land that is like your own land, a land of corn and wine, and a land of bread and vineyards. No. If these people were captives of the Assyrians, would everything just be cozy and where they were taken captive? Everybody have their own homestead, plenty to eat. You know, this was just as somebody would say, this is just poppycock. It was just plain baloney. This is just plain disingenuous. He lying through his teeth. Beware lest Hezekiah persuade you, saying, the Lord will deliver us. Now, hath any of the gods of the nations delivered his land out of the hand of the king of Assyria? You know, they knew that Assyria had destroyed all the countryside, had destroyed northern Israel. Hath any of the gods of the nation delivered his land out of the hand of king of Syria? Where are the gods of Hamath and Arphad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim, and have delivered Samaria out of my hand? Who are those among all the gods of these lands that have delivered their land out of my hand? Thus saith the Lord shall deliver Jerusalem out of my hand. But they held their peace and answered him not a word, for the king's commandment was, say, answer him not. And then came Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, that was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and Joaz the son of Asaph the recorder, to Hezekiah with their clothes rent, and told him the words of Rabshakeh. Came to pass, when King Hezekiah heard it, he rent his clothes and covered himself with sackcloth and went into the house of the Lord. Now, what's this sackcloth business? Tore his clothes, sackcloth, wore sackcloth. What's the sorrow? And probably some penitence. Hezekiah was a good guy, but why was he down there trying to make a deal with Egypt? Lack of faith. Yeah. That was the problem. So no doubt Hezekiah was thinking, I've got a problem here. God has a problem with me. And he sent, so here Hezekiah went to the house of the Lord, and he sent Eliakim, who was over the household and so on, unto Isaiah, the son of Amos. And they said unto him, thus saith Hezekiah, this day is a day of trouble, and of rebuke, and of blasphemy, for the children are come to the birth, and there's not strength to bring forth. Now that was an expression, that we're in just a world of hurt. If maybe the Lord thy God will hear the words of Rabshakeh. Now, think about the language here. It may be the Lord thy God will hear. Is there any significance in that expression? Here's this representative of the king going to Isaiah. You suppose Isaiah had been interacting with the king on issues? Why, you would think so, wouldn't you? And do you suppose Hezekiah was really listening all the time to Isaiah? Probably not. Now this expression, they come to Isaiah and they said, possibly the Lord thy God. What's the import, the significance of that expression, the Lord thy God? The Lord thy God. Wasn't God their God also? But you see, probably Hezekiah wasn't as faithful to God as he should have been when he says, the Lord thy God, your God, instead of our God, you see. Maybe that the Lord thy God will hear the words of Rabshakeh, whom the king of Assyria, his master, has sent to reproach the living God, and will reprove the words which the Lord thy God, again, the Lord thy God, your God, Isaiah, hath heard. Wherefore lift up thy prayer for the remnant that is left. So the servants of King Hezekiah came to Isaiah. Isaiah said unto them, and we know the rest of the story here. And what is the rest of the story without us reading the rest of that chapter and without going to 2 Kings 18? What is the rest of the story? God must have listened to Hezekiah, because we've gone over this a number of times. But what happened to this vast army that was out there surrounding Jerusalem? 185,000 troops. In one night they woke up dead, so to speak. Okay? Then, as you remember Old Testament history, what happened to the king of Assyria when he went back home? For whatever reason, we don't know, but two of his sons killed him. But another son took over the kingdom. So the two sons that killed him apparently weren't interested in being king, right? Because they left. But isn't that something? That this great, powerful king lost 185,000 troops. Eventually, maybe it wasn't in the same time frame, the same moment of time, but he goes back to his headquarters, and his own family kills him. Go figure.
Imagine how sheepish he returned home after all that boast. You already go to God, how better than the other God, no stronger, no more powerful.
Yeah.
And yet God wiped out his army, and he sneaks back home, only to meet death at the hands of his sons.
Yeah. Herzl was saying that he went, to use my words, he went back home with his tail between his legs. That's an expression that even young people understand, right? This great and powerful king goes back home, killed by his own sons, and then actually Judah lasted for how many more years? At least a century. Returning now to the 11th verse of the 10th chapter, the 12th verse there. Wherefore it shall come to pass that when the Lord hath performed his work upon Mount Zion and on Jerusalem, I will punish the fruit of the stout heart of the king of Assyria and the glory of his high looks. Now, in other words, when Assyria gets done what I want them to do, then what's going to happen to Assyria?
They're going to be wiped out. God used them as an instrument to punish his people. Now he will like use the Babylonians to take them out.
Yeah.
He's kind of like a Semitic prophet. I can't think of the minor prophet who was concerned that this is concerning Judah. That God was allowing this sin to go on. Why don't you do something about it? Well, God had plans to do something about it. Concerning I'm going to bring the Chaldean Babylonians, I guess, and Zephaniah way off. Anyway, and he felt that's too much, God. And he said that when they have accomplished my purpose, then I will take care of them.
Yeah. And that expression, and Herschel, you referred to it, he went home sheepishly, and he's going to take care of the glory of his high looks. The glory of his high looks. Now that's an interesting expression, isn't it? The glory of his high looks. What's the meaning there? Yeah. God God throughout his communication with mankind, God just doesn't like pride and arrogance. Is that right? Pride and arrogance are anathema to God. And that king of Assyria, he's going to be, the high looks going to be removed. And it was removed. Habakkuk.